Jess, welcome back to the show, mate. Obviously, you've been on before. We've then since met up a few times in person, but it's good to get you back on and drag you back to the show.
Yeah, what did we talk about? I forget.
Do you know what? I'm a terrible host, and I should have actually looked at that. But
You know what? I'm a terrible host, guest. I don't remember. But yeah, we had a good conversation, I bet.
we can just chalk it up that it was a long time ago, and
Yeah.
the industry's moved on, and we've changed since. Um, just to begin with, obviously you've been on before, and people can find that episode again and tell us what we spoke about. But just in case people are now coming across you for the first time, can you just walk us through your background and give people a bit of an update?
Okay, I'm going to be brief on this. You can look me up if you'd like, but I've been in a leadership role within professional sports for over a decade. So I led the departments of the New York Knicks and the Portland Trail Blazers, and then was in a leadership role at EXOS. So it's a good concept and perspective that I've gained through the years. And then prior to that, I was concierge. So I worked with tennis for 2 years and traveled the world. Worked at Shanghai Institute of Research and worked with some of the Chinese Olympians. And then prior to that, I was just cranking it out at a corporate PT, wearing triple pleated khakis and doing the grind.
It's a great reference.
We all start somewhere.
We've all worn them. Okay, so we're going to talk about ethics today, which I'm going to just make sure the listeners know ahead of time that this is going to be interesting, despite the fact that we're talking about ethics. And you're an interesting guy. We've had beers before. I can vouch that you're an interesting guy
Appreciate
who
it.
has decided to study ethics at large. But can you give us the 30,000 foot view first of kind of why did you look at ethics, and then we'll go into the kind of specifics of how you looked at it afterwards.
Yeah, when I walked into the MBA, I had never worked there before. So a lot of times you usually start at a smaller role and then you grow up into a higher role at some point. My grind was on the other end, and I actually, when I got into the league, I was in charge of a department. So I was a novice, and I really had to figure out immediately the unwritten rules and the rules within the league. And while I was doing that, I was writing my paper, or at least going through my first few years of my PhD program, not knowing what I was going to go into, likely going into some kind of quantitative study on tendon or whatever, cartilage. But in the end, I had a conversation with a vet who refused to do any of our force plates. And he was on a 1-year deal, and he pushed back quite a bit, and finally I brought him in my office, and I was like, how can we win here? I know that you don't have to do what we ask. It's basically, they're protected from the Players Association. And he just grabbed my shoulder. He goes, Jess, I love what you're doing. You're doing a great job your first year. He goes, I want everything that is determining if I get a second contract on the court and not on some effing force plates. And he walked away. And I said, interesting. That's not where I was going with it. But then the following year, I had some rookies who I gave them a wearable trackable, and they didn't want to. They refused. So then I go, okay, now I had the vet the previous year. Now I have young bucks who usually listen to what we ask, and they're pushing back. And I said, I think we might have a problem here. I think we might have an issue with either integration or communication or education on these devices. And then that's where I started to kind of write a paper on it.
Cool. Where did you do that, and kind of when did you do it, and what was the paper? Three big questions, but
yeah, I wrote it around the time of 2020, so COVID. I was running the department, and I actually had, in between those two, I had a 2-year-old and a baby. So if anybody can say, I don't know if I can do a PhD, you can. Just sign up and do it. So that was an issue, is I just was balancing a lot. But that was kind of where I started with the paper. I went to Concordia University of Chicago, and I got my PhD with leadership in human performance. And that was basically because I couldn't really do another PhD program in the role that I was in. So it was a virtual base, and it was something that allowed me to do my job and also do the PhD.
how does one go about studying ethics in that way? Now, like, a lot of people in our craft will sort of think of their PhD, or people that they know that have done PhDs, and they'll think of kind of more traditional, like hard science, experimental design sort of studies that they do as within their PhD. How do you kind of go about it in this realm?
I mean, the value is in the subjectivity with this paper, and it's because we want to get some feedback from the tested. There's been so much emphasis on the accuracy, reliability, validity of devices. How do we use metrics to make decisions? That's all on the tester. And there's hardly anything when it sheds light on the actual participant of the studies. And that was the issue that I found, was there was a discrepancy, a mountain of research over here and nothing on this side, other than some narrative reviews. So that was the issue in itself, was the clear discrepancy between these two entities, and then seeing that I think there's some weight to this. Like, we need to start asking our players what their beliefs are, and again, we'll go deeper into it, but one thing is when I looked through the lit review, I couldn't find anything. So now I'm doing a qualitative study, which is basically, I chose a thematic analysis, so it's basically an inductive process where I do interviews, and then after every interview I code each sentence that athlete says, and then those codes become larger coding measures, and then they become themes. And then that's where you can start to pull some of this subjectivity of data and try to make an actual visual understanding of what's going on with this paper. So that's kind of the general thoughts of a qualitative study.
Cool. Let's get into the kind of nuts and bolts of it then. Walk us through kind of what the paper exactly was looking at and how it was looking at it, beyond the kind of mechanisms you just mentioned.
Yeah, so when we pull all that data and we start to find themes, there was 6 different themes that we found, and I'll just break them down. Communication, consent, data management, differences in tech standards, personal beliefs, and team strategy. So within those, you can kind of like open up each theme and get a better understanding. I can quickly break down what that means.
Yeah, perfect.
So from a communication stance, every team was different. So the delivery of data, delivery of information to the players were completely different. And the value that I got with these 15 athletes were, I pulled a lot of guys that were vets, but then also some rookies, and got a good understanding of people that had been on multiple teams versus somebody that just entered the league. And the standard was, it was just, the communication was very flawed. We weren't educating the players like we needed to, and immediately when you don't educate, there just becomes mistrust. It just happens naturally. Because all you're doing is you're accruing data, you're telling them to wear devices, and there's no information on the other end. So the pushback that I found was, because I've been on that side on the other end, and that is, a lot of these players aren't receptive of even hearing their data. They don't really care. But that does not validate the right that you shouldn't be more proactive in discussing to them. So there was a part of me that the emphasis needs to be, if you're going to put a device on a player, you need to figure out a way to communicate with them in the way that they want, or in the terminology that they want to hear it in, and be the proactive individual. Do not be passive, because once passiveness kicks in, it just, again, leads to mistrust.
Do you find that people, I mean, you've worked with many practitioners, you don't need to put anyone under the bus, but you speak to lots of practitioners as well as an educator. Do you ever find that practitioners have become so used to just seeing tech all the time, force plates, force frames, handheld dynamometers, whatever it is, that we're starting to just assume that athletes want to be tested? They just know what these things are, that it's in their best interest. Is there a lot of assumptions that we kind of make?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge assumption, that they actually care, because most of them don't. And the other thing is, instead of looking so much on how valid is this device, it really should be is, how easy is it to put on? Are there any issues with glitches or things that will disrupt the flow of the athlete, that will then because they have about this much of attention spans. So we need to understand that. And we can't look foolish by putting devices on that fail, that don't turn on when they need to. And the other thing is the conversation needs to be had earlier now than we ever had, because there's digital natives, basically people born, after the internet was incepted. Now we're looking at technology, though we're not at that point yet. We are seeing athletes that likely have been exposed to some wearable tech as a kid or in high school and already have beliefs set on what they think is valuable and what's not. So we need to have these conversations way earlier and more in depth.
Cool. No, thank you. Well, I interrupted your flow after the, I think you were finishing the communication point. What was the, what was the next one?
Communication is, there's other pieces about it, but there is just a consistency. There's ways to find, if you have like a leaderboard to show the data on, so when they walk in every day, they can actually see their data to say, oh, these are being aggregated, collected, and decisions are being made by that. Then the second theme was consent. And I'm not going to go into much on that because it wasn't great. And whenever you have a piece of wearable technology, it has to be approved by the wearable tech team of the NBA. But then also the staff needs to have a written instruction of why you're using it, what the metrics mean, and how is it going to be helpful to the athlete. None of them got that. It was just more of a verbal consent and just a conversation with the person on the staff, which means we need to do better than that. And then data management, it was split between ownership and accessibility. So interesting enough, most of these guys didn't care about their data. As in, if I were to leave or if I were to go and train in the off season, I don't really care about that data. So there was that was a head scratching moment of, well, one, they don't really feel it's valuable, that they don't really want to have it. And then there was also some feedback on, it was interesting, I had to actually look this up, but data interoperability, which is basically you have data on this device and how does it measure with a device used in the off season. And if it doesn't match up apples to apples, they didn't want that information. So that was another piece of, again, not many of them cared about having that when they left. Again, we care about it, but I think that that's something that will evolve as this continues to mature. Like, this is going to be important for everyone. And then again, the accessibility was the other issue. Again, is how quickly can you give this information to the player? That was another challenge. The next one was differences in tech standard. So every team did things differently. Staffs were assigned certain things, and some of them used it to make strategy decisions and some didn't. But the interesting piece on this was some of the players mentioned that they could feel the pressure of the person whose role was it to get them to wear it, which is concerning because then they feel like, oh, this isn't really for me. This is for you to validate your role on the team, and that if I don't put this device on, then your ass is in trouble. So it wasn't like this mutual relationship about this piece of tech. It was more the pressure that the players could feel from the staff. Like, this is an initiative that we need to get done, and that if I can't get you to wear this, then my boss is going to talk to me. So there's it was really good information that, again, a qualitative study, you're not going to get this type of information on a quantitative side. But especially being in the league for 7 seasons, like, this was stuff that I could actually it was palpable to me because I understand the setting.
Yeah.
The next one was personal beliefs, and I can basically split this into 3 groups. One was the adopters. So this is the Ivan Drago team, which is basically in Rocky. You have the Russian boxer that basically is hooked up to everything to just get the 1%, just to get a little bit better. This was the adopters, and they were the ones that wanted everything. They wanted to talk about their data. They were a little bit overboard on it, but clearly they're not the ones that are is an issue to get them to put stuff on. It's more about, do we have the bandwidth to talk to them about it every day? The next one is the resistors. This was the gentleman that I worked with in the first year where he's like, I want my performance to be dictated on the actual court, not anywhere in the weight room or in this medical room. So this is your big brother. This is the uber surveillance, concerned about many things. Where is their data being collected and what's being decided from it? And then the last group was the optimizers. And the optimizers they basically were okay. They were on board to do it and be compliant, but they also wanted to make sure that it wasn't overdone. So I would say in general, you should take a minimalist approach when it comes to using tech in the team setting. But more importantly, having a conversation with the athlete to say, when should we put this on within your daily flow? We're going to make sure that this thing is fully charged, ready to go. We're going to select technology that's not going to be disruptive in the way that you go up throughout your day. And if you could just iron all that out, then that group was fine. Now, and then the last group was team strategy. And we can kind of go into that last bit, but I'm just going to hit this last theme, which was team strategy was basically, how is this data being used? And is this data being collected from the health and performance side? Is it being translated to the coaching staff? Because one of the big issues that I exposed in the paper was, if you're going to put something on them and you're not going to act upon it, you might as well not put it on them. Yeah. Because all it's going to do is going to create animosity. It's going to put you in the wrong, because they're going to say, my workload's high, you tell me to wear this and I'm being compliant, but the coaching staff isn't doing anything to change the practice load. So you can take this and I'm not wearing it today. That'd be the nicest way that they would say that. So basically, don't look like a fool. Don't do something knowing that nothing will get done from it. And another piece was, with the team strategy, if you could get someone from the front office, the coaching staff, and someone from the medical, and address the team early on about the technology, there were multiple players that felt like they would have been more on board, knowing that all three parties of the team were involved in this decision making.
Yeah, I want to come back to team strategies a bit later in this conversation. What I'd love to do is, within those kind of 3-player subgroups, just tease out some extra kind of parts. Yeah. When you're working, we'll go through each of them. What might be like a classic problem or practical issue that somebody might encounter with each of those 3 subgroups? If we did maybe the adopters first, what's like how could it go wrong with this group scenario?
Yeah, I mean, you can go overboard. You can set fear. You can kind of get lost in the weeds of something that is very nuanced or really isn't a huge deciding factor, and that can be a huge concern. If you show that their HRV is low and you got a game later that day, it's probably not a good decision to even measure it. Again, because it's not going to do anything. It's not going to change the way that you approach the game, but it may affect the athlete, saying like, I don't feel right, the score's low, and then they go off and have a dud for a game. And it really is all psychological. So that's a concern. I would just say like overstaking decisions based on data, when we really don't know how much we can take from this to actually make good decisions.
Yeah, I think we've all been there as well, haven't we, where we've got our hands on a new toy that gives us objective data on athletes, and we just can't wait to use it. And we use it at the soonest possible moment we get with an athlete, and we're just fascinated by what it shows, way more than they are, because I think you almost need that tool and data to become mature in your own practice before I think it's easy to kind of pull back from using it or overusing it. I think we've all probably been there at some point. I think with years and with experience, you learn to not get too excited by the new sort of bells and whistles and launch into using them too quick and think more about the context. But I think at least early on, we've all got excited by our new toys.
Yeah, exactly.
How about
if you want to go to the resistors?
Sure.
The resistors are, you got to pull them into your office, and you got to say, what's a feasible win on both ends? So you're going at it kind of more on an individual basis. You are hearing out what their issues are, and then you're going to find whatever middle ground looks like. And then also know, like, I'm going to make sure the people that you want to see this are the only ones that look at this data. So they feel a little bit more comfortable, as in, like, okay, so the coaching staff's not going to look at this. No, it's just us and the front office, and we're going to make decisions there. Now, if you make a promise like that, you better stand on it and not, take advantage of the situation. The other thing is, come at it like, I'm respecting your beliefs on this, and you got to respect me. Let's make this mutual as well. That this is my job and this is my initiative, and if you don't believe it, then keep it to yourself. But the moment you start talking in the locker room and you start making side marks and, like, maybe pulling some of the young guys saying, like, you don't need to wear that, dude, that's when you are in a boat, and instead of rowing with us all, you're actually throwing water in the boat. You're trying to sink it. And that is a clear sign of disrespect to me and our team. So I'm going to approach it as, you have some issues with it. We're going to find whatever seems like a feasible option, but just make sure you're not weighing it down with the other team. Let them make their decision on it.
And then I guess lastly, the optimizers, what could be like a classic problem and solution for that group?
Have a sit-down discussion about when they want to put it on, how much devices they want to put on. Also be minimalist in the approach. So if you want to collect a certain amount of data per week, don't go overboard on it. Because the thing that you don't want to do is, you don't want that middle group, which is the optimizers, to shift into resistors.
Yeah. Because
if you have optimizers shift up towards the boat, which is closer to what the Ivan Dragos of the world, the optimizers. They're the ones that are going to be on board with it. But the moment that you start to shake the boat, you start to ask for too much, if you start to put too many devices, if it just starts to get frustrating, you're going to have a mutiny and no devices will be worn.
Yeah, I'm glad you said the word shift then as well, because I was thinking as you were speaking that when you kind of subgroup athletes, it makes it sound like their personality types, kind of like Enneagram or Myers-Briggs or whatever it is, but actually they can shift. I mean, I know with Enneagram you can kind of shift a bit as well, but like you can shift from being, as an example, it's not contract year, you feel secure, and you're very compliant to using tools and being tested and data being looked at, versus then contracts up, bad part in your career, all of a sudden you don't want data held against you potentially, so you're going to be more cautious around stuff. So I like that you said word shift, because I feel like it's fair.
I will say this, for a general strategy for all three, all 15, when they really cared about their data? When they were hurt. When they were a rehab case. Then they want all of that baseline data. They want to make sure when they're cleared, they're comparing it to the old stuff. So if anything, this is a way to strategize and educate up front. This is why we're doing it, and this is why we need good effort on the force plates. This is why we need you to wear wearable tech on practice. This is why we need you to do these things, because the moment you want it, the moment that you feel, I don't know if I'm right, well, I can't really pull this information to help that decision because you never gave me the compliance, which is ironic. They want it when they really want it, but they don't want to do it anywhere else. But it's at least a way to have a good conversation up front that you will want it at some point. If it's this year, next year, whatever. We all have injuries, we all deal with it, but this is the stuff you're going to want.
It's like an AirTag, isn't it? You don't care. Nobody cares about having an AirTag on them until they lose their keys, and then it's the best invention ever. So
the worst part is when it's not charged.
Yeah.
And you have it.
Let's go back to the team perspectives. When you were talking about, I guess, some of the ways it can go wrong at an organisation, a lot of the things that you're bringing up really sound or echo what's commonplace for GDPR. If we're talking about, like consumer data and I guess healthcare data as well. But as a kind of healthcare practitioner now, if you were kind of going back into a team agnostic of sport, or context here, how would you approach that side of it differently? Like how has all of this changed like your practice if you're going back in to lead a team and naturally data is going to be a part of the job?
There's two things. One is a philosophical view, and this is from, again, when I wrote my paper, there's not much I could pull. So I pulled a lot of theoretical philosophy from Michel Foucault, who was a French philosopher, and what he did is he looked at post-structuralism, which, if you go to structuralism is basically how the society is built on rules, methods, rigor, hierarchy, etc. It's all ironed out and established. And then post-constructionalist is the opposite, which is everything, structure is a facade, and the number one thing that matters is power and who wields it. And I think this world is changing rapidly to post-constructionalism, which is AI, cryptocurrency, and technology. And with all of those things, his big piece was knowledge is power. That is everything. Is if you acquire enough knowledge on someone, you have power over them. And I think going into it now, I understand why athletes don't want to be as receptive in doing these things, but they don't understand it from a big picture. So one thing that we can talk about is the medical gaze, which is basically if you gaze at someone long enough, they become less human and they become more of a data point. And that's a problem. And that's what's happening when we wear this, we just are becoming some entity that collects data for Big Brother. And the problem with that is when you start to accrue enough data collection points, then you can start to make normative data on someone's uniqueness biologically, so that when you see another athlete come in, you already have a good understanding of where he compares to this group. And that's a conflict of interest. And we can look at that as medical providers like, well, we're trying to elevate, we're trying to enhance performance and reduce injury. But there's more to it, and that is whenever there's a difference in power, there's a difference in control. So I think that's a piece that we need to understand. And then there's another thing you talked about, which is called medical paternalism, which is basically you are a medical provider and you alter the way that you speak to your athlete or patient based on wanting an outcome that you are trying to seek. Or if you're changing the way you speak to an athlete because you don't think they understand what the concepts are. So, i.e., if I'm looking at an MRI and I see a tear here or a fusion here, I'm going to change the way I speak to make it better for the narrative that we're trying to create. And when you have pro sports and we need to make people play basketball and we need to get wins and losses because front offices, medical staffs, and coaches are on the line every year, medical paternalism is a real thing. The opposite would be shared decision model, which is we're bringing everyone and the patient's information and we're making a decision together. And that's ideally what we want. But if there's a world where there can be some nuance and changing of language, in sometimes not even in a negative way, not in a way that we're trying to strategize to make a decision, it's just the nature of the beast. That happens in pro sports every day. And so there's that piece of medical gaze, and then the talk about biopower, which is creating power and leverage on the uniqueness of somebody biologically or through their athletic biometric data, which is ABD. And I think that is something that we need to understand. And one other thing, this thing right here, if you ask a player that I want to track your sleep, now you're asking to track them outside of work.
Yeah.
And I think for us, we are so entrenched in the medical field, we're just like, well, we're trying to enhance performance. We're trying to get better recovery so that it's going to minimize injury. But the moment that your employer says, hey, Andy, put this on, We're going to track you every day to see how you sleep. And then we're going to compare your performance metrics from before and after. And if I see that score is low enough, I'm actually going to bring you into my office. We're going to ask, what's going on in life? Like, why are we so low? Why are you at 50 for the last 2 weeks? And you're like, dude, like, I broke up with my girl. Like, I'm just struggling and I'm depressed right now. It's like, oh, my bad. Well, I wanted to make sure that you were optimized with your job. It's a different story when we look at it at ourselves. And that's the biggest picture about this whole thing is we need to look at athletes differently as humans and not a lab experiment.
This is a real opinion question. So go as crazy with it as you want or as safe as you want with it. With all of that in mind, how far do you sell a test or how far do you sell a metric to an athlete in terms of sometimes there's a lot being asked of them in a day. Time of day could make a difference. Have they just come off the court? Whatever the sport is, you want them to do a force plate jump or something as an example, like CMJ that you can monitor. They don't want to do it. How many times or how do you decide I've asked them enough or they've said no enough? What's the sort of cutoff of I've asked them, they don't want to do it on Monday. I asked them on Tuesday they might. I'm great. Maybe on Tuesday they do, but maybe Tuesday they say no. Where do you sort of draw the line of like, where's the cutoff for a no? Of like, they're not interested in this right now. I'm not going to push this any further.
That has a little contextual flavor to it, man. I'll do my best with the answer. So
Yes.
It matters on the player.
Yeah.
It really does. How much does that power? How much power does that player have? A player can point at someone and get rid of them very quickly.
Yeah.
So then the question is, how much am I going to push? If it's the franchise player, I may have 1 or 2 reps.
Yeah.
If it's the rookie, I'm pushing a bit harder. I'm asking why. So it's all like everything in pro sports is it's context and who wields the biggest sword, who wields the biggest power. So I would say that that's the most important piece. I will say this though, there's a bigger ethical question here, and that is if you're testing something for a return to play to get your KPIs where they need to be, but you already know that the decision is that player is playing tonight. Is it ethical to test? Because if you test and he has a 25% deficit to that limb and he says, I'm playing, then who's in the wrong? Because now you've opened up Pandora's box, you've found the metric, you see the discrepancy, and now you have to step in line in front of the coach, the player, and the front office to say, he has a 25% deficit, he needs to not play. So my question to you is, if the decision is already made, then why do we test?
Obviously, we always kind of have to close the loop in a situation, whether it's return to play, performance testing. We want to sort of explain the test, why we're doing it, get consent, hopefully do the test, feedback the results, do something with it. Is there ever a situation where that's just different? What you're talking about there is a situation where you test them pre-game and now you feel a responsibility to share the information to all the stakeholders involved. Is there ever a situation where that's just not the case? In an ethical way, I should preface.
I can't fully answer that one. Everything is different. Decisions are made differently at the end of the year if you're in a playoff run, if you're not. You start to see the injury trends increase when you're not a playoff team, and vice versa. You have guys that are playing injured and understand that. So at that point, you're pulling the start article and you can read all you want on the contextual piece of that paper, right? It's something at least that we can say from a medical side, hey, this is what we have. Let's make adjustments. Instead of him playing 32 minutes, let's get him down to 26. Let's see if he can, you start to strategize in the game, specifically on how that looks based on not an ideal scenario. Is it ethical? Well, you're still trying to make the best decision for the player, but you also are being aware of the scenario. Yeah. And that everyone needs to be on board with it.
We just had Maggie Bryant on, who I'm sure you'll know, and it was a throwaway mention in the episode with her that people can listen to. She very briefly mentioned the NBA biomechanics kind of study or project that's going out at the moment, where, for context for listeners, all NBA teams will be trying to perform a battery of tests to get different kinetic and kinematic kind of markers for players. That's obviously going to be challenging to get good data from players with the players' best intentions or best efforts, hopefully, in the tests. Is there anything that you would do sort of like from an ethics perspective, or from just, is there anything you just do practically, if that was you, having to try and get those tests, given the amount of work you've done studying this area?
Well, understand that it's not going to be an ideal scenario if you require the team just to move forward with this plan and just be like, here's the equipment, here's the things we want to do. Hey, we've done the bare minimum, so it's not as taxing, but there you go, guys, you do it. That's unfair. That is not a realistic situation. We, on the team side, have enough battles with our own initiatives. So then the question is like, now you're altering the way that we are looking at our team and how we approach it from a philosophical stance, because we are having to appease this narrative. So if this thing is to work, kind of like what I mentioned with the team strategy piece, front office, likely the PA, the NBA office, and the medical staff, there needs to be some kind of meeting to say, hey, players, the PA signed up for this, and the league signed up for this. This happened together, so you guys got to go do it. And let's not bitch and moan about it, because this has been an agreed upon amongst two large entities to lower injury risks. So I think the biggest piece that we need to do is we need to treat these athletes like adults and not like teenagers. Like, be upfront, communicate, and give the reasons why, and then show all the parties involved and all the money that was spent on their behalf. So there literally needs to be someone from the PA and the front office to be present for this.
Yeah, no, I love that. I'm aware of time, Jess, and I know you've got other things straight after this call today with me, but other than building your gym, which anyone that follows you on Instagram will know you are literally building your gym at the moment. Where can people follow you, and what stuff have you got going on at the moment that we can shed some light on?
Yeah, you can. I've been hitting a few podcasts lately, so I've just been telling people to hit me up on Rehab Code. That is my education company, and it's also where I do mentorship, and I do some weekend courses as well. But I produce enough content to entertain you at least. And LinkedIn as well. That's probably the other piece that you can pull my attention. Anything ethical, I usually answer on LinkedIn.
Well, I have to admit as well, I loved your features recently of reviewing gym equipment from a performance coach or performance therapist perspective. I think a few of us probably follow My Garage Gym Reviews or whatever it's called, but yeah. I'm liking the high performance version of that you've rolled out recently, so keep going with that.
Well, just know I have not got a cent from any company. I need to figure out how I make that a financial model.
Build those views and you'd be getting free products. So.
Sounds good. But anybody, reach out to me. Let's talk ethics. It's a big piece of what I'm going to explore in the future, and it is clearly something that needs to be talked about more often.
Cool. Perfect. Well, mate, always good to speak to you. Need to get beers again, and thank you for coming on the show again.
All right. Thanks, brother.